When we think of the Protestant Reformation, one name usually comes to mind, Martin Luther, right? 1517. But the real story, the first sparks of that fire, were actually lit more than 100 years earlier, over in England. It was a radical, really disruptive movement called Lollardy. And today we're going to dig into how these early ideas challenged the very foundations of the medieval world. Think about that for a second. What if the Reformation wasn't this sudden explosion in Germany, but the final eruption of ideas that had been simmering for generations? We're about to explore the beliefs that completely shook up 14th century England, and believe me, they set the stage for one of the biggest shifts in Western history.
And this timeline? Man, it really puts it all into perspective. You've got over a century between John Wycliffe starting his work and Martin Luther nailing those theses to the door. This shows you Wycliffe wasn't just some historical footnote, he was a pioneer, way ahead of his time. All right, so let's get right to it. Let's start at the very beginning, with the man who lit that first spark.
Meet John Wycliffe. He was an Oxford theologian, and his ideas would become the single greatest disturbing force, as they called it, in English religious life. He was the brilliant mind, the intellectual engine, behind a movement that would soon get a very dangerous reputation.
And that movement got a name, Lollardy. Its followers, the Lollards, sometimes called poor priests, did something absolutely revolutionary. They took Wycliffe's complex academic ideas out of the ivory towers of Oxford and started spreading them to regular people, calling for a total overhaul of the church. So, what did these Lollards actually believe? What were these ideas that were considered so radical, so dangerous, that they threatened to bring the whole medieval world crashing down?
Okay, so the big one, the absolute cornerstone of their belief system, was a principle that would later become the bedrock of the entire Protestant Reformation, Sola Scriptura, Scripture alone. The Lollards argued that the Bible, and only the Bible, was the true source of religious authority, not church tradition, not councils, and definitely not the Pope.
And if you thought that was radical, get this. They went right for the heart of the church's rituals by denying transubstantiation, the doctrine that the bread and wine literally become Christ's body and blood. Wycliffe called it a feigned miracle, and his followers were even blunter. They just called it a mouthful of bread. For the time, that was just profoundly shocking stuff.
And Wycliffe, he did not pull any punches when it came to the Pope. He attacked the papacy with just stunningly harsh language, calling him the man of sin and even Lucifer's member. This wasn't just a friendly disagreement. This was an open declaration of war on the head of the church.
And believe me, the list just kept going. They argued that if a priest was sinful, any sacrament he performed was invalid. They questioned the very idea of free will. They attacked popular things like pilgrimages and indulgences. And maybe the biggest one of all, they redefined the church itself, not as this physical hierarchy based in Rome, but as an invisible community of all true believers everywhere.
But look, this wasn't just some stuffy debate club for theologians. As we're about to see, these ideas posed a very real, very immediate danger to the entire social and political order of England.
Here's the idea that really lit the fuse. Dominion is founded in grace. Wycliffe argued that all authority, a king's right to rule, a lord's right to his land, comes from God, and you lose it if you're in a state of mortal sin. The implications of that were just staggering. It meant any king, any bishop, any landowner could be stripped of all their power and property if they were deemed sinful. This was social and political dynamite.
So you can see this is a total head-on collision of two worldviews. On every single key issue, the Lollards proposed a revolutionary alternative. Scripture for everybody, not just the priests. Church property? Nah, give it to the state. And the clergy's authority? It should be based on being a good person, not on some divine hierarchy. It was a fundamental challenge to the entire power structure of the age.
And, it didn't take long for these ideas to spill out from books and into the streets. They fueled all sorts of unrest and eventually, yes, open rebellion. In 1414, a Lollard knight, Sir John Oldcastle, actually led an uprising. It failed, but it proved to the authorities, without a doubt, that this heresy was a genuine threat to the stability of the entire kingdom.
So with its spiritual authority and the stability of the state on the line, you better believe the establishment was going to fight back. And they mounted a fierce, systematic campaign to crush Lollardy once and for all.
And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about here, 267.
That's the number of distinct propositions from Wycliffe's own writings that censors at his own university, Oxford, formally condemned as heresy. 267.
And their response wasn't just a one-off thing. It was a step-by-step crackdown. First came the official condemnations from the church. Then the state got involved, passing new laws specifically to target heretics. That led to arrests and repression, and when that wasn't enough to stop a full-blown rebellion, it was met with overwhelming military force.
And this is where things get really dark. This law from 1401, De heretico comburendo, it literally means on the burning of heretics. For the first time in English history, Parliament passed the law that made belief itself a capital crime. The punishment being burned at the stake. Suddenly, the price for having the wrong ideas was your life.
So, okay, the powers that be brought the hammer down hard. But did it work? Well, in England, yeah, for a while, the movement was suppressed. But an idea, as it turns out, is a very hard thing to kill.
The organized Lollard movement itself might have been crushed after that failed rebellion, but the ideas, Scripture alone, questioning the Pope, challenging church wealth, the genie was already out of the bottle. Those concepts were just too powerful to disappear completely.
And here's how that genie traveled. Wycliffe's writings were smuggled out of England and made their way to Bohemia, what's now the Czech Republic. A preacher there named Jan Hus picked them up, embraced them, and sparked a massive movement of his own. From there, these English ideas spread across Europe, creating this fertile ground where eventually Martin Luther's Reformation would explosively take root.
Which brings us to the big takeaway. Today, historians don't see Wycliffe as just some failed heretic. They see him as a proto-Protestant. He, along with Hus, laid all the philosophical and theological groundwork for the revolution that would permanently reshape the Western world 150 years later. He didn't just light a spark, he planted the seed. So the whole story of Lollardy, its rise, its violent suppression, and its incredible world-changing legacy, it really leaves us with one powerful question. Once an idea's time has truly come, can any amount of force, any law, any army ever really stop it?